Booga booga.
We just defeated Team Plasma Getsus. Now it's time to recover and have a chat. With me today, I have Gerardo, the Viceroy of Team Plasma.
Greetings. Prepare for trouble.
Wrong team.
That's okay.
Prepare to have your cat Pokemon stolen. And Teresa, the Warden of the Shadow Triad.
And make it double.
Fantastic.
To protect the world from devastation, to unite our people within our nation.
And I am Hunter. And I am also here.
To extend the reach to the stars above.
James.
Getsus. Colrus. This week we kind of wanted to talk about there's some discussion about remakes and what they'll be maybe doing for remakes. Maybe this generation, maybe not, regarding Gen 5 and Black and White, the Black and White Pokemon games. So I thought it'd be fun to kind of talk about what we expect and what we can kind of go off of based on previous patterns. Not that Pokemon is known to be following patterns. Lately, every single generation, they've kind of broken a rule ever since Gen 5, actually. Currently, I don't know, what are your guys' thoughts about attempting Black and White remakes?
I am hesitant, shockingly, because I really want them, personally. But I also, I like Black and White so much that I don't want them to
screw it up,
bastardize it.
Yeah.
Personally, I like Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearl, but I still prefer regular Diamond and Pearl over Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearl, which is unique because the other remakes, like Omega, Fire Red and Leaf Green, Heart Gold and Soul Silver, I could arguably like them better than the original versions of their games. I think Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearl, I think they were too similar to the original version that I think the original version's art style makes them more entertaining than the remake version. And I'm just worried that Black and White remake would do some kind of similar thing where I would just end up being like, yeah, but the original version was better.
Yeah, the art style was very faithful to the original, but I don't know if that faithful art style works well in 3D. And so I think that Black and White is in a very similar scenario where you have very similar looking character sprites, both in overworld and in battle, to where I feel like... Actually, I didn't have too many issues with the in-battle 3D models, actually, for Brilliant Diamond Shining Pearl. But I think a lot of the complaints come from the overworld art. And because it's so traditional, because it's so accurate to the original Diamond and Pearl, and because that doesn't really work in 3D, it kind of resulted in, I don't know how to describe it, an overly chibi, overly simplified...
Mm-hmm.
I don't know, it just didn't have the same beauty, I think, that Diamond and Pearl did.
Yeah.
To piggyback off of that, I think Ilka did an okay job, which is, saying kind of probably a bit too much, giving them a little bit too much credit. But, they worked with probably what they were given. And in that light, I hope if they do get handed off, the Black and White remake or, potential Black and White remake, they probably might be given a little bit more to work with. Like maybe Brilliant Diamond Shining Pearl was like a test for them.
I think it was, for sure.
And if they're still going to work with Game Freak going forward, I just kind of hope that they've learned from Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearl, because it wasn't an awful game. It was very
They did
faithful.
pretty well, didn't they?
Yeah, for sure.
Didn't they sell
still
pretty
Pokemon?
Well?
Yeah. And I, like Hunter said, I really liked how they looked in battle. Like, everything was pretty smooth looking there. I just kind of, I guess the initial shock of it not being how Sword and Shield look is probably what, tipped people off the most. But I think there was a lot of good in those remakes?
I think that because Pokemon fans have been asking for a more traditional remake for long time, I don't know, different Pokemon fans want different things. I've learned over the years. The reason why the Pokemon community is very toxic at times is primarily because different people want different things. Because Pokemon is such a massive, wide-spanning franchise to where different people can appreciate and see different things in Pokemon. The loud minority of people saying that they wanted Pokemon to return to its roots, Pokemon to be way more traditional, and for them to stop screwing up remakes by making a remake that's almost identical to the original, kind of bit a lot of people in the butt, because a lot of people did not want that, turns out, or the majority of fans jumped in and started playing that game and realized, wow, Pokemon has come a long way since playing this game that's very traditional and a lot like the original games. It was kind of rough.
Yeah, so much so is that they were so true to Diamond and Pearl that they, disregarded Platinum's features and, additions
Yeah.
entirely. I think Platinum itself was probably the game they probably should have built off of, but, you win some, you lose some.
And I think with Black and White, because it's such a beloved game, it's basically the fan favorite, right? Like as far
Right,
as like
yeah.
the older Pokemon fans goes, like Black and White is seen as a masterpiece. And I've seen online a lot of people on Reddit and stuff. I saw one person on Reddit actually post that they thought that Sword and Shield was a great Pokemon game,
Hmm.
but that was before they went back and played Black and White for the first time. So, Black and
Yeah.
White is held to a very high standard, and I think because naturally a lot of fans are very protective over it, I think that the only option is to do a more traditional style game and to be very faithful to the original, just like Diamond and Pearl was. Whereas that's not necessarily the right option.
Yeah, as somebody who personally does prefer the original Pokemon games to the modern ones, I actually do have two very specific ideas for how I'd want this remake to come out. I would want either play it the safe way and just do an HD port of the original, because I think the Black and White visually looks great
Yeah. It still looks good. It holds up, I think,
Yeah.
visually.
as
For sure.
is. Yeah, all of the pixel art is very charming.
Yeah.
The sprites move during the battle, like that coupled with the pixel art just makes it look very visually appealing to me. The overworld in Black and White is, general 3D models going off of like the way that they were doing it on Diamond and Pearl, and they have the sprites walking through these kind of regularly designed 3D models for the open world. I
Yeah,
think
like
looks really nice. It's like it looks like the HD 2D games that Square Enix has been putting out in the recent
Mhm.
years,
Yeah.
but
They
it
could
was like
totally.
way before that, and it's beautiful.
If they could like match that, like, I'm not saying get Square Enix to help, but maybe get Square Enix to help. If they can
Yeah,
match like the style of like Octopath, I think that would be like the perfect in like, I know people are probably hoping for, along the lines of Scarlet and Violet type of 3D as time goes on, But if there was a charming way to present the pixel art kind of like that, it would be, I think people would complain less.
yeah, and I think the visual style is one of Black and White's most defining features to separate it out from the other generations of Pokemon.
Mm-hmm. It's almost like a feature of the game is that it looks good.
Yeah, exactly. It's like timeless, I think.
Yeah, for sure.
And then that brings me to the other idea that I would like to see. This is the one that I would like to see them do with the remake, because I generally prefer new ideas over ports. But I would want them to do a port over doing something like Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearl. And just to be clear, that's not to say that I dislike those games at all. I don't. I actually, those are my favorite Pokemon games on the Switch currently.
Interesting.
But anyways, what I would like to see is to see them do like a full HD 2D remake of Black and White. Kind of like the way that Square Enix is doing it, but keeping more in line with the way that Black and White already looks,
Mm-hmm.
and even extending that beyond, because that brings it to like, are they going to keep the gameplay style and the world the way that it was back on the DS, or are they going to adapt it to be like Scarlet and Violet, where it's more open world? Are they going to do an open world version of the Unova region? And even if they did that, I still think that doing an HD 2D style would still look great if they get it right. And that might sound weird. It might, but I think it would be gorgeous.
Back when Omega Ruby Alpha Sapphire came out, there was a controversy of not having character customization, even though it was in X and Y. Omega Ruby Alpha Sapphire did not have character customization because it wasn't in the original Ruby and Sapphire.
Right.
You know, with Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearl, there was, but just not to the extent of how it's been. Like, you could customize your character's outfit, but like, you just kind of like select an outfit and you don't like customize the intricate details of it or like hair or anything like that. And I wonder if they would take that same route in Black and White remakes. I wouldn't be upset because I think they did it okay in BDSP.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I feel like a lot of the fan base, including me, it really appreciates the more in-depth kind of piece-by-piece customization. Scarlet and Violet kind of flopped on that a bit, but that's neither here nor there.
Brilliant Diamond Shining Pearl was almost a half measure when it comes to character customization, because there was just like single outfits that you could pick from, and some of them were like really freaking cool actually. And I think because that project probably had a way smaller scope, because it was an older game, so naturally it's gonna have a smaller scope when doing a traditional remake. But also, I think that they wanted to keep the budget pretty low because it was a brand new developer's first time. You know, they were trusting a main series Pokemon game with an outside developer for the first time for them. So, like, naturally, they wanted to keep it pretty low and keep their expectations within due bounds. But now that they're kind of unleashed in a way, since they've kind of proven themselves, because Brilliant Diamond Shining Pearl did very, very well. I think that it's like, let me check this for sure. I think it's in the top 10. No, it's number 11, actually. It's just behind Let's Go Pikachu and Eevee. Literally only a couple 100,000, actually, under. But it's at least the 11th best-selling Switch game ever so far. So it did really freaking well at like almost 15 million units. So, you know, I think that Ilka has kind of proven themselves now. So I do see if Ilka is going to be doing the follow-up games, the follow-up remakes, or just handling other Pokemon franchise in the future. I'm not sure if they actually have before other Pokemon stuff, but at least as far as the main series goes, I think that they're probably going to lighten the leash a little bit, give them a little bit more leeway.
Yeah, I believe Ilka was primarily mobile games, non-Nintendo mobile games, and then like this was their big break or something like that.
So I think as far as character customization goes, because it was in Brilliant Diamond Shining Pearl, and because that was just kind of the trial run for them, that they would kind of take off the training wheels, hopefully a little bit.
Yeah, so are we going to say that they might be staying with them?
I think so. I don't see Pokemon putting the effort into helping them develop a Pokemon game and all of the like the basic framework of a Pokemon game in a completely different game engine, because they used Unity for it, Unity engine for Brilliant Diamond Shining Pearl, whereas all of the recent Pokemon, actually I think every single Pokemon game has all been in proprietary engines. So the fact that they let Ilka use Unity for one, and then helped them build the basic framework with still being able to like bring those Pokemon from other games into a completely other engine with a completely different programming language probably and everything, and it just work. Like the fact that you can bring a Pokemon from Scarlet and Violet, and that Pokemon works in Brilliant Diamond Shining Pearl. So the fact that they helped them with that, I don't see them going back. I think that they're still going to be using Unity, if I had to guess, for remakes going forward.
Mm-hmm.
And so why wouldn't they use the developer that has experience doing that for the first time?
Yeah, for sure. I just fear for their what's the, like, not their safety. That's a bit too dire, but like their reputation, because like they were super burned for, I guess, the job that they did with Brilliant Diamond Shining Pearl, and I think they're worthy of a second chance. I know.
Yeah, I mean, every Pokemon game is going to have haters, though. Like, you're going to hear
Yeah.
the loudest, and clearly, all the people hating on Pokemon games are the minority. Because, again, it sold almost 15 million units and will likely reach 15 million units soon. So,
Yeah.
it's a very, very vocal minority. So, I do see, and everyone has their own issues with Pokemon, but everyone plays them anyways. So, like, you know,
Mm-hmm.
you can only take Pokemon fans
So
their
seriously.
so seriously. I mean, granted, I am one of them, and I have a
Yeah.
lot of complaints personally. We did a whole episode
Mm-hmm.
about Pokemon once before.
I told them my favorite Pokemon game is none of them, because whichever one I'm playing at the time is my favorite, and I can complain about it for hours.
So now, which Pokemon game is the worst Pokemon game?
Because I'm not playing it, Pokemon Scarlet.
The real answer is all of them.
All of them, yes. Pokemon's terrible, guys.
So, I can say that because I am a very massive Pokemon fan. It's kind of in my
Yeah.
DNA almost.
Mhm.
So
I'm
I
ride or
think,
die with the series. I can be
exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I was mad almost the entire 100 hours I put into Pokemon Scarlet.
I was never smiled even once. What a bad game.
Freaking hate this thing. But yeah, I think that Pokemon fans are always going to complain. So even though, in a way, for example, like I mentioned, Diamond and Pearl was exactly what everybody was asking for. It's gonna be the
Yeah, they got
exact.
it.
Yeah, and they got it, and they hated it. So the same thing is gonna happen with Black and White, regardless. So I don't know. Do you think that they'll? Because I kind of danced around the topic before, but how traditional of a remake do you expect they would do for Black and White?
Traditional in the sense of
It being super accurate to the original Black and White. Like, I don't see them doing the open world thing that Gerardo mentioned, for example. I think that people are too protective over Black and White. But how accurate to the originals do you think that they will be in that regard?
I think they'll probably stick to the original flow of Black and White, in the regards of, Black and White had it was only Unova Pokemon for the entire, playthrough.
Yeah.
I think that's gonna stay. And the fact that it's the most linear, one of the most linear Pokemon games, I should say.
Yeah.
And I think that's probably just gonna stay as well. I'm probably fine with that.
That's probably going to be very jarring to new fans, because
Yeah.
Pokemon has opened up more and more as time has gone on,
Mhm.
whereas Black and White is probably the most linear Pokemon game. But because they were able to tell what a lot of people consider to be the best story, I think to its benefit.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
I think the way that it, like you said, it held your hand in such a way to tell you the story. And I think that's why it resonated with people in the way that it did.
Looking at it, like, what I would expect them to do the most is the cheaper option for them, which would be to just do like a direct remake. Basically what they did with Diamond and Pearl.
Mm-hmm.
Not try to like incorporate any new ideas into it. That's what I expect them to do.
Yeah, for sure. I also wanted to add on to this that people might want to at least start thinking about it, along the lines of things being current right now. If they're leaning towards a less faithful remake, then they might try to do this wacky thing where they're gonna follow Scarlet and Violet's footsteps and make if they want to, continue to add new Pokemon, perhaps new
I
forms and
don't
stuff
see
like
them
that.
doing that. Maybe new forms.
Uh, you know, Black is the future one and White is the past one. But yeah, that's if they change how drastic faithful is in their terms.
As far as like the future one and the past one goes, that would be a pretty minor thing anyways, because that's a newer thing for Pokemon. So like in Scarlet and Violet, the games are still basically identical. They take place in modern day, but
Hmm.
the theme at least is the past and the future based on which game you're playing. And Black and White already had that. The theme is already the past or the future with the White Forest or the Black City or whatever else might be the case. So I still see it. I mean, they could still keep that theme and still do a very faithful remake because the games are already like that, you know?
Yeah, for sure. I get you.
So I don't think that those two ideas are contradictory. In fact, a more faithful remake would mean including that theme. I could see them maybe going a little bit more into it in the same way that Scarlet and Violet is a bit more themed around it than Black and White is.
Yeah, I'm sure whatever comes after these games would probably be something more along the lines of how they wrapped up the Sinnoh and Sword and Shield stuff with more forms and stuff like that. Maybe not dedicated to just these remake games if they really do want to keep it faithful, or they can go, the Omega Ruby Alpha Sapphire route where it's just a completely new experience. And I'm
Yeah.
thinking that would be my preferred way because there's so much
Hmm.
more now these days that they could be, bring new life into the game, but keep that, Unova only linear story, just touched up in a new way,
I would.
Perhaps with that multiverse stuff as they've talked about in Oros.
I think I would like an Omega Ruby Alpha Sapphire type remake more.
Yeah.
Black and White is kind of in a weird situation, or rather, Gen 5 is kind of in a weird situation where it wasn't just Black and White that came out. Black and White was still like really, really good, but then they continued the story instead of doing Pokemon Gray, which a lot of people were expecting.
Hmm.
They ended up doing just pure sequels, Black 2 and White 2, where Black 2 is the direct sequel to Black, and then White 2 is the direct sequel to White. Because of that, it makes it very tricky to make a remake of Gen 5 because it's not just a single game they're going to have to remake. So, will they make two games on the same cartridge like Square Enix does? Like, they'll release a cartridge that just has two little icons on it and the Switch? Or will they release them one after the other? I think that that's a bad idea. Or will they just incorporate Black and White 2 into the story of Black and White? Because then those are different main characters that you're playing as. How
Hmm.
do you guys think that they'll even handle that? Or what do you even prefer? Because I'm not even sure if I have a preference.
That's one of the reasons why I wouldn't be necessarily surprised if they went with the direct port route, because that coupling with like the fact that Black and White already visually doesn't look that bad, like it visually looks appealing, they could just port Black and White 2, like Black 1 and Black 2 on one cartridge, and then White 1 on White 2 on one cartridge, and then make that the yearly Pokemon release for the year, like an HD version of the games. Then you're like buying two games in one. Then they don't have to remake the games. I'm not saying that this is a good idea, but it
Hmm.
would be a solution to this problem, I guess, in a way.
I get what you're saying. Maybe there will be a bit more of a DLC aspect, as much as I dislike the idea of that.
Uh,
Where they'll, Black and White is the base game and Black and White 2 is the DLC, and maybe the character designs will be different in that regard, or maybe it'll be like a combination of the two, characters. And even if they do, that's touching on the character customization aspect of it again, will they even do that? It's kind of hard to say how they would handle that, but I think I'd see them maybe not even paying attention to Black and White 2, even though Black and White 2 wraps up the character arcs of, gets us an end. They have their closures there. It kind of would feel half baked if it didn't have Black and White 2,
Yeah.
I think if they did do it, it would kind of probably be an unfortunate DLC situation.
I could see them doing a DLC because so the way that the Isle of Armor was handled, with the way that all the levels for the wild encounter Pokemon and the way that the levels for the trainers and everything was handled, was it just scales with where you're at in the story at the time.
Mm-hmm.
I could to where you could do that right in the beginning of the game and have Cubchoo with you throughout your playthrough, but a lot of people who already played the game ended up getting a level 10 Cubchoo or 5 or whatever Cubchoo when they already had like level 70 Pokemon. So I could see them doing something similar because the precedent is set. So they could do it to where the trainers and the wild Pokemon scale, because you would have to start the game from scratch again, to where you don't have to pick a new starter. You can just keep going, and all the Team Plasma grunts and stuff that you run into are just scaled.
Yeah, I can see that working in a way. I mean,
that might be the only way to really do it. Maybe not even as DLC, but just as a sequel, and then have the new outfits for the Black and White 2 characters as character customization outfits. After you beat the game or something. I don't know.
They did that with, they are completely different characters, but they did that with Platinum. They gave you the outfit from Platinum as DLC.
Yeah.
I actually have another idea to throw on this fire.
Okay.
What if and I'm going to put this in quotes, remakes is Black and White 3?
Okay.
Pokemon
what if
Gray.
that's
Pokemon
the
Gray.
remake? And it's not or Pokemon Gray. Yeah.
It's not going to be.
And
Pokemon
they just don't do a remake. It's just another sequel, keeping with the Black and White theme.
It releases on the
sequel.
DS.
I would actually love that, but
that would be kind of cool.
They wouldn't do it, but yeah.
No, they wouldn't.
Yeah.
It's finally here, guys. Pokemon Gray.
Pokemon Gray. Am I the only one here who absolutely loved triple battles and rotation battles?
No, because I liked that too. It got really wacky with inverse battles as well.
I really like how that generation in general seemed like it was the one that kind of was rethinking the way that Pokemon battles can be in the first place. Not just like kind of playing with the reverse battles or the triple battles and rotation battles, but just in general, a lot of like rethinking the way that weather works, rethinking the way like a lot of fundamental Pokemon battle systems were kind of reworked in that game and rethought of, and they experimented a lot with what Pokemon battles could be.
And I think that it would be very important to keep that for a potential remake for this game, especially because of, I believe Scarlet and Violet fell short on that. The game hardly had any even double battles, except for one specific gym challenge, or two. Was it two?
I think it was just the one.
Yeah. In the overworld, there were no double battles anywhere, and I think that was a crime against gameplay variety.
So Black and White also introduced the idea of being able to use items, and there was a kind of weird economy of like battle points or whatever it was called to be able to use certain items, to where like every turn you would gain some points, but then you could use them to like use potions and revives and stuff like that. I thought that was kind of interesting. It made multiplayer battles and competitive battling a bit more like the way that the game is played in the the story of the game is played, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
Because battling online and competitive Pokemon in general kind of feels like a completely different game entirely. The idea of the Wonder Launcher made it feel way more like you were playing the same game, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and speaking of that, Gerardo actually brought it up earlier. Uh, you can cut this part out, but Gerardo brought it up earlier. It was just him talking about being connected together with the what was it called
The Sea Gear.
the Sea Gear. Yeah.
Oh yeah, remind me
It,
what the
it, it
Sea
kind
Gear
of
exactly did. I don't think I ever really used it.
functioned as like the how the PSS would in Generation 6, where it
Mhm.
would be like the communication center for like wireless trading and battles and stuff like that.
Right.
But it would also have this thing where you could pseudo show up in your friend's world.
Yeah.
You could interact with each other and like give items and like kind of explore together, but not really. It was cool.
Yeah, I feel like Black and White explored a lot of different concepts that some of which would show up later throughout the franchise, but then a lot of them were just kind of abandoned, these like dangling threads of like features and stuff that never really came to fruition that were
Hmm.
explored initially in Black and White. I think that that's one of the things that makes Black and White as an experience feel very special
Yeah,
because it
for
was
sure.
so unique compared to other Pokemon games.
I think the Sea Gear was a bit too forward thinking for the ecosystem of the DS at the time. Like,
Yeah.
I think they totally programmed that with like hearing about the 3DS and its features. So yeah, I think it was just kind of a missed opportunity that nobody really got to participate with much because like you didn't even know much about it.
Yeah, I was vaguely aware of it, but I never really used it, I think.
Hmm.
What do you guys think that they'll do regarding changing the seasons? Because I think that we're all expecting that they need to be as faithful to the originals as possible, with hopefully still kind of adding some new features, some new ideas, but some mechanical things still need to stay the same, right? So
Hmm.
specifically when it comes to the way that what was the deerling?
Yeah,
Yeah.
Why am I
Deerling, and
blanking on the name?
it completely like altered the way that the terrain would be in the overworld as the time changed. Like
Hmm.
you
Yeah.
could only access certain parts of the map if it was like fall, for example.
Yeah.
And I think that's a big feature. Well, not a big feature of Unova, but just like it's one of those Unova things where it wouldn't be complete without it.
Makes the world feel more real, I think, too, like more dynamic.
Yeah, it wasn't
Yeah.
like 1-to-1 with the real world seasons. Like I believe it was like on a 3-month rotation or something like that.
Well,
And
that would
it,
be the same as real world seasons.
I mean, I think it was out of order.
It was
Or
way
maybe a
faster than
month.
that.
I think
Yeah.
it was a 1 month rotation.
Okay, I see.
Something like that, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it definitely added a lot to the experience for sure.
It made it feel like not everything was in your control, not everything was at your fingertips, just like how the real world is. And
Hmm.
that kind of mystery, adding that kind of mystery to the game, made it feel more real and more lived in, especially since that was the first game to have like very realistic characters with real stories and tackling big ideas like Pokemon free will and stuff like that. So like, it was almost like that mechanic feels more appropriate for that game compared to a lot of the other like more silly cartoony Pokemon games, which is basically every Pokemon game except Black and White.
Yeah, and I think they would handle, that changing of seasons probably the same way. Or I mean, if they want to have like a lasting one where they could just kind of, Animal Crossing it and like program it with the actual, you know, month and date in mind.
If they did try to go for the like full remake route where they try to make the game world more like it open like Scarlet and Violet, they could totally use the seasons thing as like a feature to advertise for this new game over Scarlet and Violet,
Hmm.
since Scarlet and Violet doesn't have that, because that'd be cool. Every season the whole open world changes to reflect the season that you're in.
Yeah. How do I segue? I can just put like a sound effect.
Whoosh.
Whoosh. Now I have a little kind of sound effect. How do you think that they would handle some of the darker themes that Black and White introduced? Because the whole concept is truth versus ideals, kind of And interestingly, the game was more religious than a lot of other games, with there being an actual religion and kind of a more traditional monarchy with N and everything. It tried to tackle a lot of big ideas, and I don't know if it fully explored them to the extent that I would like, to the extent that a lot of people would prefer. But it explored those concepts pretty well, at least for a Pokemon game. For a silly kids game. One of the things that they tried to tackle was the ideals of your Pokemon kind of loving you and you growing kind of an attachment to them, versus the truth of I think it was actually technically in Black and White too, but like the rival of that game has his Pokemon stolen from Team Plasma. And when he runs into that Pokemon later, that same Pokemon, it doesn't recognize him because it was captured. It is in a different Pokeball now, following a different master, which raises a lot of questions about captured Pokemon free will and stuff. How do you think that they'll even try to tackle some of those themes? Because I feel like a lot more of the Pokemon games nowadays have become more and more simplified and more child friendly, if that makes sense.
I think they'll double down.
I would love for them to double down.
Yeah, it'll definitely be if they want to keep the spiritual, not the spiritual successor, but just the original feeling of it. They definitely have to keep the darker tone of the series, of the story in there. And I mean, kids can handle it. They handled Sun and Moon. They handled Shieldward and Swordbird. I think they can go through anything. It definitely would do them okay enough to just keep it the way it was. I kind of said that I was kidding with the doubling down thing, but I think they totally should. That just add even more onto that. It would be a nice change of pace for Game Freak to just make the story stick out in their minds more, kind of like how they did with Scarlet and Violet. But even to a more why am I fighting type of degree. Like, well, what is my purpose?
Exactly, and using Scarlet and Violet as an example, I think it's actually promising, because I think the story got shockingly dark near the end for a Pokemon game, and this is spoilery. You realize that the professor was dead the whole game, and you're just talking to an AI replication of them, and they sort of abandoned their child for their work.
Just sort of.
Then the AI replication of them abandons their child for the past or future again in front of them.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think that they're definitely capable of handling more mature stories for sure.
Yeah. I don't think they'll shy away from it, because it's not like comparing it to Nintendo's other games isn't necessarily a good comparison, since Game Freak is second party. I'd say like the storyline in like Mother 3 is more mature than like any of the Pokemon storylines, for example.
Now that we've recovered and had ourselves a little chat, what did you think?
Leave us a comment on YouTube and like the episode.
That really helps us out.
We're also on Twitter and Instagram at the Low HP Podcast, if you want to reach out there.
And subscribe if you want to catch more of us on YouTube.
We're also on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. Links in the show notes as always.